Monster Hunter Wilds is finally here, and I have been obsessively playing it with all of the free time that I can scrounge together. I haven't done literally everything that you could do in the game, but I'm pretty far into the end game by now, so I thought that it was about time that I sat down and shared my thoughts on the game. Now, to be fair, I have made it very obvious that I am a huge Monster Hunter fan, and I have been for a fairly long time. My first ever time with the series was Monster Hunter Tri all the way back on the Wii, and I've been playing pretty much every game since then. So, to be frank, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that I was going to like this game. They would have to really screw up pretty hard for me to not at least enjoy playing it. So yeah, I in fact love Monster Hunter Wilds. So if all you want from this video is whether or not I like the game, well, there's your answer. I think that they evolved the gameplay in some really fun ways. I think it's just overall super fun to play. I mean, I've sunk over 60 hours into the game in just the first week, and by the time I finish recording and editing and uploading this video, that'll easily be over 100. So yeah, but as I like to say, it is also important to critique the things that you love, or else you risk them never getting better. And yeah, I got some good critiques for this game. So let's start things off with some of the big ones, and then I can get back to gushing about this game later on. So most obviously, the biggest elephant in the room is definitely the performance issues. This is one of the biggest problems and why the game has such a mixed review on Steam right now. Like, I don't know if Capcom is just still bad at optimizing games on PC, or maybe they bit off a little bit more than they can chew, or some people are speculating that the engine is just not great for the scale of game that Monster Hunter is. Whatever the issue, the ultimate end cause is that the performance for the game is terrible. Like, as a point of reference, I upgraded my rig specifically just to play this game. I'm now rocking a brand new i9 CPU and a 5080, and even with ray tracing disabled and using DLSS, I'm barely able to get a consistent 60 at 1440p, and that's kind of insane. Now, to be fair, I am not using frame generation, and I am using the high-res texture pack, so obviously that lowers my performance a little bit beyond that. But even still, these brand new parts should not be getting pushed that hard by a game like this. Like, it doesn't, like, don't get me wrong, the game looks good, but it doesn't feel like it looks good enough to justify the sheer amount of power that it takes to actually run it. And, like, that's the thing, is that the performance issues go beyond just like how well you can run it at a high frame rate. The reason I downloaded the high-res texture pack is that, well, so many of the textures, even on the highest settings in the default version, just look bad. Like, when you zoom in on a character, so often, like, their face will look fine, but their clothes would look like muddy, pixelated messes. Like, whenever I felt like zooming in on my hunter to, you know, admire my brand new armor set that I crafted, I'd often see, like, muddy, terrible textures just splattered all over the place. Like, I'm not trying to, I'm not playing the game at like 8K trying to nitpick every pixel. Even just trying to look at it normally, it was hard to ignore these kinds of issues. Not to mention that the game has really atrocious pop-in at times. It's not all the time, but like every time you go to a new area or watch a cutscene, like it feels like you're going back to the mid-2000s where you'd watch all of the textures suddenly take a few seconds before they properly loaded in basically every time the game did anything. Like, it's pretty bad, and it's a shame because, like, when the game is running on all cylinders, it does look pretty great. Like, I love the more grounded and, you know, realism style version of Monster Hunter games, and seeing all of the detail in the plants and the endemic life and all, like, even the monsters themselves. Like, I love how much detail is on them. The new wounding mechanic, which I'll go into more detail later on in the review, but like, you actually create visible wounds on the monsters on top of the usual stuff, like how you can cut off their tails and whatnot, and you can even see the wounds like scar over by the time you finish the hunt. It seems like a really simple thing, but I really love the level of detail that kind of shows just how badly you're beating up these giant monsters and stuff. but like it is just a shame because it's kind of hard to actually get to enjoy those visuals unless you're willing to like push your PC to the max. Like I was able to go into some settings, like go beyond the normal settings and like adjust some like config files, and there are also mods that people have released to help improve the performance issues, but like you shouldn't have to go through that much effort just to get the game to run at a reasonable frame rate. But anyways, let's move on to another topic. I think I've drilled the point home hard enough in terms of performance. It's bad, but if you're willing to fuck with the settings a little bit, if you're willing to, adjust a few things here and there, you can probably get it running at a decent enough clip, depending on your tolerance for certain things, like how good the lighting or the textures and stuff is. But like I said, let's move on to another topic, because the other most interesting thing about this particular Monster Hunter is the story. Now, like, here's the thing. Most Monster Hunter games have a really, really simple story. Like, here, I will literally summarize basically every single Monster Hunter game. Oh man, there's some weird big thing happening with the environment and the local monster population. Surely you gotta hunt those monsters before they hurt someone, and oh no, it turned out that the reason why all those monsters were going crazy was because there was a bigger monster that was riling everything up, so you gotta go hunt that now, and oh no, it turns out that that monster was holding off an even bigger monster that you gotta go, like, the formula for a Monster Hunter game is pretty paint by numbers, if we're being honest. And, I mean, that's all we really need. The entire point of the game is right there in the title. Any plot in these games is mostly an excuse to just go hunt more monsters. But Wilds does actually put a little bit more effort into its campaign. Like, there are elements of the story that are really cool and interesting that I actually don't want to spoil. And, like, not just because I don't want to, like, reveal some kind of cool fight, or, like, early on or something. Like, there are actual elements of the plot and the world building of the new Eastlands location that this game takes place in that are interesting enough reveals that I think it's worth experiencing the story for yourself to learn about them as time goes on. Like, I actually had fun kind of speculating about where the plot was going to go as I was playing through the campaign, and the reveals and the payoffs for what I was speculating about were actually kind of cool and satisfying. Now, like, to be fair, when it comes to the overall quality of the story, like, it's not mind-blowing. There is some cool stuff, don't get me wrong, and if you're like a die-hard Monster Hunter lore nerd, then there are some things in the story that I think you'll probably get excited about. But we're not talking like about Citizen Kane or anything crazy like that. Like, there are one or two points where like a character will do or just say something that feels profoundly stupid. And, I mean, on the other hand, I do feel like there are some people talking about the story that I think are a bit overly harsh on these elements of the plot, because, like, the game explicitly calls out the characters for their bad takes, and it completely agrees with all the people saying that, like, no, that person is wrong, they probably shouldn't be saying that. And, like, the characters later on in the story, like, go, yeah, I was wrong, that was dumb of me to say. So I feel like some people are being a little bit overly vitriolic on those elements of the plot, but I do understand that, like, in the moment, that definitely feels like, why did that character do that? That is just dumb, But still, if anything, the real issues with the campaign are really more about how it's structured in terms of, like, gameplay. Like, this is a much more focused and, if anything, kind of on-rails campaign than you usually get from a Monster Hunter game. And once again, they somehow lost the ancient technology that allows for multiple players to view the same cutscenes together while playing through the campaign, even though I'm pretty sure that was a thing, like, back in the 3DS games, so I don't know why they can't do that anymore, and so it can be super annoying to actually play through the campaign, like, in co-op multiplayer. And on top of that, the game also, like, will spawn monsters into the world that you don't technically have a high enough rank to hunt yet. So, like, you end up in this awkward situation where, like, oh, that looks cool, let me hunt it. And then Alma will be like, no, you can't hunt that yet, and you just can't get any rewards for hunting. And it's like, so then why did you put it in the world if I can't interact with it yet? It just seems like a weird thing to do. And like the other aspect of the campaign is that for years people have kind of joked in the Monster Hunter community that low rank, because like Monster Hunter games are split between low rank and high rank as sort of like difficulty tiers, and they say that low rank is basically quote unquote the tutorial, and that the real game starts when you get to high rank. But I'm pretty sure the devs like have been listening to that or something, because they've basically made that literally true now. Like the entire campaign, the main campaign, is just low rank, and when you beat the campaign, you then enter high rank. And the campaign, I think, is very linear and structured the way that it is, because they want to make it act as a full tutorial for the game. And so low rank is actually a bit shorter than it usually would be, but like I said, that's because it's mostly focused on this very like straightforward campaign, and the game very clearly wants you to like you can attempt to like do some multiplayer stuff in low rank and go off the beaten path and do some optional quests and whatnot, but it feels like the game really wants you to just beeline through the campaign from start to finish, so that it can try to teach you everything and then just dump you into high rank so that you can go off and do your own thing. And like, to be fair, once the low rank campaign is over and you get to high rank, the game really opens up. So like, where low rank is very sort of constrained and linear into the way that this campaign is structured, high rank basically just dumps you into the field and goes, have fun hunting. And like, honestly, it feels like a completely different game once the story is over, and you can really kind of finally understand what Wilds was going for with the way that they've structured its mechanics. Because like, one of the new things that's in this game is that the camps that you go to like upgrade your gear and whatnot are actually in the maps where you're hunting monsters. So there's no longer any kind of loading screen or different locations and whatnot between the two. You can just go upgrade your weapons and then walk right back out into the field and hunt monsters. And like, as a result, once I got to high rank, I spent like 3 hours in the like oil well basin area just hunting monster after monster non-stop as they showed up in the area. Like, if I got hungry, I would cook food just out in the field and then sharpen my weapon and go off and hunt another Rathian. Like, it was kind of amazing, and it was like the most like, low rank was fun, but once I got to high rank and I started playing like that was when the game truly became like excellent to me. And I think that this is a good time as any to shift the topic to talking about the gameplay itself. And I mean, this is what people like me come to Monster Hunter for. It is a foregone conclusion, pretty much, that the core gameplay of basically every entry in the series is going to be exquisite, and Wilds is no exception. In fact, each game as of late has been introducing like different sort of combat gimmicks to try and mix things up a little bit and introduce some new elements to the hunting gameplay. And, you know, you have things like Rise's wire bugs, and in Iceborne they introduced the Clutch Claw, and I think that Wilds' new gimmick, the wounding mechanic, is, I think, the best one so far, at least of all these new games. Like, by comparison, wirebugs were always kind of a mixed bag for me in Rise. Like, some wirebug attacks are cool, but many of them I felt were like a bit overtuned. Like, take my favorite weapon, the Charge Blade, for example. One of the wirebug moves it got was something called Counter Peak Performance, which was a better block than all of your normal guarding options. It was easier to perform than things like guard points. It instantly filled all of your files, and then it comboed into your strongest move immediately as a follow-up. Like, at that point, why even bother using like the rest of the weapon, right? Like, and the Charge Blade wasn't the only weapon like that. I know Longsword got like 5 different counters that were completely stepping on each other's toes in terms of like functionality and design. So wirebug mechanics always felt a bit like all over the place in terms of how they were balanced and designed with each other. And then of course the Clutch Claw from Iceborne is pretty maligned because it just didn't combo well with most of the weapons. Like, there were a couple weapons, like the Lance had an amazing Clutch Claw counter that was really cool, but all of the other weapons, like, most of the other weapons didn't have very good, like, Clutch Claw moves, so actually using it mid-combat was a sort of, like, awkward process where you had to stop attacking and then start aiming, and then you had to, like, attack, and it was just really weird to use, and yet it felt necessary because of how good the actual, like, reward for pulling off a Clutch Claw attack was. So it was this weird thing where, like, you couldn't really ignore it, but it was also not really fun to use. Meanwhile, Wilds kind of reintroduces the wounding part of the Clutch Claw mechanics, but without the annoying claw part. The way it works now is simply attacking the same spot on a monster repeatedly will eventually open up a wound on it, and then all of the weapons have their own dedicated focus strikes that can be used to pop those wounds for bursts of damage. And this is great because I think it ties in to, like, other already existing similar mechanics, like how if you focus on a monster's tail, you can eventually cut it off, or you can break a monster's face by focusing there and whatnot. So, like, this makes it so that no matter where you're focusing your attacks on the monster, you can eventually open up a wound and be rewarded for, you know, your consistency. So, like, it actually ties in to all these other mechanics, I think, really well. And not to mention that, like, the actual focus mode itself is a pretty great addition to the series as well. Like, on its own, it essentially just lets you more easily aim your attacks mid-combo. So this is particularly useful on weapons like Greatsword, because it's like a really big, slow attacking weapon, so if the monster moves to the right slightly, then you're just gonna whiff entirely. But now with focus mode, you can actually, like, sort of turn while you're charging up your attack, and then that will allow you to actually hit the monster despite having it move around a little bit. And, like, it has varying levels of usability for, like, other weapons, but, like, on certain weapons like Greatsword, it is, like, a huge boon in effectiveness. And it's also just really nice because, like, with Charge Blade again, when you're doing your ultimate super amped ultimate or element discharge, you don't want to, like, swing at the air and waste all your file energy. So being able to spin mid attack and make it so that I can actually hit the monster I'm aiming at, like, it feels really nice to be able to pull that off. And, like, the only real criticism I think I can come up with for these new mechanics is that, like, when you get into multiplayer, when you have so many hunters all wailing on the same monster, because of each hunter is building up their own wounds, and everybody can capitalize on each other's wounds, then, like, you can just kind of stun lock the monster like crazy, because you have 4 hunters creating 4 times as many wounds as normal, and as a result, you like, there's way too many opportunities to pop them, and every time you pop a wound, usually it knocks the monster down for a bit. So as a result, when you get into, like, full-on multiplayer, sure, like, when you get it against the hardest monsters, it's not so bad, but, like, against anything but the most endgame of monsters, it's kind of, I feel like they should maybe tone it back a little bit. Like, if you're playing in multiplayer, it should take, like, if you're playing with 4 hunters, it should take 4 times as long to create a wound on the monster. And then that way, it would make it so that, like, you'd have to coordinate with other people to maybe try to aim at the same spot, or if you aren't, then it will just take that much longer to actually create wounds, and then that will help make it so that you're not just stun locking these monsters into oblivion. But, you know, like I said, I think that's a pretty minor complaint. It obviously doesn't affect single player at all, and multiplayer is by no means ruined by this fact. I just think that they could maybe tone it back a little bit. So yeah, overall, the gameplay is amazing. Like, to talk more generally about it, like, the vast majority of the weapons, I think, are in the best state that they've ever been in. Like I said, Charge Blade is my main, but I dabble in a lot of other weapons, like Greatsword, Longsword, Hunting Horn, Lance, Gun Lance, you know, a few others like that, and, like, every single weapon I've played feels amazing. Like, if it's not the best version that it's ever been in, it's it's got to be up there. Like, Hunting Horn in particular got some pretty rad new features with the whole, like, aura bubble thing that it can do now, and, like, not to mention, like, you get, like, ultimate songs that you can perform. Like, Hunting Horn is crazy. I love it so much. Like, Hunting Horn Sword is now currently my secondary after Charge Blade, and of course, like Great Sword, like it's all great. The only downgrades that I've heard about, but I haven't really gotten too much experience with them, is I've heard the bow guns didn't quite make it out as well as the other weapons, so light bowgun and heavy bowgun. But I'm not really much of a bow gunner myself, so I'm afraid I can't really comment too well on that. So maybe look up some videos about bowgun in Wilds if you're more curious about that. But yeah, I still think that the vast majority of weapons are really good and amazing in this game. So, and I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe they could improve the bowguns with an update or two. So, like, there's still time. We got title updates. We got the DLC. I'm sure that things can be patched up over time. And you know, the other big change they made to the gameplay is really more about the progression, and that is through the armor skill system. Like, they keep mixing this up because, like, World changed everything from the previous games, and then Rise changed it again, and, you know, honestly, I think Rise, you know, has my favorite modern armor skill system. Of all the new games, at least since, you know, World, so of the three newest ones, because I like the way that decorations are crafted and the way that they are organized into the different tiers in Rise. I think makes the most sense. But they did do something interesting here. So decorations, in case you don't know, are the skill upgrades you can apply to armor, and in this game, they're acquired mostly randomly through completing quests now, which is kind of similar to World, which was really annoying. But you can still craft specific basic decorations if you really just need like a specific skill, like Attack Up or Critical Eye or a Quick Sheath or whatever. And the drop rates for the, you know, non-crafting ones actually still seem pretty reasonable. Like, I've managed to get most of the skills that I could want for pretty much all the weapons that I use, and I use a lot of different weapons, as I was talking about earlier, so there's very few instances where I've gone like, oh, I don't have a decoration for the skill, so I can't, like, make it a proper armor set for this weapon yet. So it hasn't really been nearly as annoying as the RNG decos from World, because, like, trying to get, like, an Attack Up gem in World felt like finding a leprechaun. It was really bad back then. But on top of that, they're also now much more heavily emphasizing the idea of skills being on weapons. So now each skill is differentiated as being either an armor skill or a weapon skill. And so when you have armor decorations, you can't slot them onto your weapon slots, and you can't slot weapon skills onto armor slots. And as a result, because you only have one weapon at a time, like you can swap between two weapons, but you only get the skills from the one you currently have equipped. And then you have 5 armor pieces. 5 armor pieces. So your weapon skills end up being a lot more limited than your armor skills, which is kind of interesting. So, like, that was a thing, is that in World and Rise, the other two modern games, they really started allowing players to equip way more skills than you could in the older games. Like, in older Monster Hunter, getting like half a dozen different skills in your armor set was like an amazing end game build, right? And even then, you might end up having like a couple of negative skills, because that was the thing back then. But like in World and Rise, you could have literally multiple pages of skills from all of the different skills that you could equip at once. And so as a result, whenever you were making a armor for a weapon set and whatnot, you could basically go like, oh, this weapon wants this skill, and this skill. Okay, yeah, I'll just put every single skill I could possibly want for this weapon onto this armor set, and then I would still have room left over to slot in some comfort skills like, you know, defense up and recovery up and stuff like that. But now, because you have so few room to equip weapon skills, that means that there's actually now a little bit more picking and choosing. Like, yeah, it would be nice to get, like, say, both attack up and load shells for my charge blade, but if I'm already using up my slots for things like guard up and artillery, then I'm gonna have to start picking and choosing what I really want to use on my armor set. But at the same time, while the attack skills are more limited, that still leaves plenty of room to have lots of armor skills, since you still have so many armor skill slots. So you are still free to equip various, defensive and comfort skills like recovery up and whatnot, without having to worry about it eating into your more offensive skill selection. So I do like this aspect of it, where like you don't have to feel bad about equipping like defense up anymore, because it's not using up the same slots that you would be using to get like attack and guard up and whatnot on your weapon. The only real complaint that I have about this system is that a lot of the built-in skills that come with many of the weapons feel like they could maybe use a once-over, because like so many weapons have draw skills like critical draw and punishing draw, like the skills that are only active when you first draw your weapon from the sheath, and like those skills are great on weapons like greatsword and longsword, but why are they on weapons like lance, which is meant to be like a tanky weapon where you keep your weapon out like at all times? Like, why are we putting it on heavy bowgun and things like that? Like, every single weapon type, I swear, has so many of these critical, like, draw skills and whatnot. And it just feels completely nonsensical when they could be having so many better skills. Like, Lance should be getting more lances that have, like, guard and guard up, not, like, crit draw. It just feels like a waste of skill points that could have been spent on something more generally useful. And I do think some of these weapons could maybe use a once-over with picking what skills they come with. Now, thankfully, the endgame system that is currently in the game kind of lets you get around this, because it essentially lets you just craft fully customizable weapons with you being able to pick whatever element or status type that they deal, and then you can just have all the deco slots you want to slot in whatever skills you want. The only issue is that the game doesn't have weapon transmog, so I feel like chances are people are going to be using these endgame weapons for basically everything, and that means everyone's going to have the same weapons equipped. And they've done transmog in the past, so I don't know why they haven't done it yet. And I feel like they really should just let you put on a weapon skin over these endgame weapons, so that you can not only have all the skills you want on the weapons, but also have them just look like whatever you want. And then that way you at least still have some reason to go back and like craft some of the other cooler weapon designs. Because that is something that they did address, because back in Monster Hunter World, they had a lot of really bad copy and paste weapon designs that were just clearly done out of necessity, because they clearly didn't have enough time or effort to actually design unique weapons for every single monster. But now they seem to have resolved that issue and made a lot more unique weapons now for this game. But like I said, I feel like they should let you transmog them so that you can actually use more of those unique weapon designs, because they're all really, really cool, and I want to see more people using them in multiplayer. But I do think that leads into the next point we're talking about, which is that this is the start of a new Monster Hunter's life cycle, which is frankly the most awkward period to play these games. Now, don't get me wrong, the game has tons of content. I mean, like I said, I have gotten over 60 hours of gameplay in just the first week, and I'm easily going to hit triple digits by week 2. So, like, to say that is like a small amount of content is kind of ludicrous. But compared to the end of, any prior Monster Hunter, it's always kind of an awkward situation, since they'll always have way more monsters in the previous games, because they'll be fully updated with new DLC and all the title updates and all of this everything. So it's kind of an awkward comparison, when you look at like, oh, this game only has 30 different monsters compared to like the 60 or more that like every previous game would have, because that's how many monsters you get after you take into account all of the updates and DLC and everything. Plus, another aspect of this being like a new Monster Hunter game is the difficulty. Now, right now, Wilds is pretty easy, and even compared to a new Monster Hunter game, it is admittedly, I think, a little bit easier than average, but I do think it ramps up decently well when you get into high rank. Fights start feeling like proper length hunts again, and things get a little bit more challenging, but obviously it's still nothing compared to, you know, the maxed out, arch-tempered, risen, ultimate, turbo-powered 3000 Elder Dragons that you're usually fighting at the end of a prior game. So naturally, for an experienced player, very little in low or even high rank is really going to challenge you, and that is particularly true in Wilds. But again, because this is the start of the new life cycle, you know, who knows what future title updates will bring. You know, maybe there'll be more harder content in that. Eventually we'll obviously get the master rank expansion, and that will obviously ramp up the difficulty as well. So it's hard to say just how hard this game will be until those title updates really start to roll out. So ultimately, let me try and just collect my thoughts real quick and try to come to some kind of conclusion for this review as I try to calm down from the inherent hype that I always get from merely playing a new Monster Hunter. Obviously, I think that Wilds is a great game. It's not perfect by any means, and I do think that there are definitely some annoyances that I didn't really have time to go into because this review is already getting long enough, like how needlessly complex the online multiplayer system is. But at its core, it is still a really fun game where you get to swing around a giant sword and kill some monsters. If you're brand new to the series, I do think that Wilds is a great entry point, and chances are by the time you reach the end of the content in the base game right now, there'll have probably been some new title updates to expand on that content even further. However, I will admit that, like, if you just want to get into the series with a game that has a lot more content right now, then I do think that it would be fair to maybe go back and play either a Rise or World instead, and, you know, spend some time with those, because then you obviously have all the title updates, they have DLC and everything, and then by the time that you complete those games, chances are Wilds will have released its DLC, and then you can play the more complete and endgame version of Wilds instead of playing it, you know, as they release the updates over the course of the next year or so. So, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag if you're a brand new player, but if you are a more experienced player like myself, who's obviously already played all of those games, well, I mean, I probably don't need to tell you that obviously Wilds is, I think, worth your time and attention, and I have a feeling that it's only going to get better and better as the free title updates roll out, and of course the inevitable Master Rank DLC comes out. I'll probably make another review when that DLC comes out to give my more complete and hopefully more concise thoughts on the game after it's had some time to mature, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see more Monster Hunter content in the future. But for now, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Happy hunting.